It's a late night in 1940s Czechoslovakia with the sounds of raindrops pouring down, filling the night air. A pair of 5-year-old twins named Vera and Olga Kriegel are tucked into bed fast asleep, excited to spend time with family and friends the next day. As the peaceful night continued, however, the calmness was suddenly interrupted by the sound of several armed men breaking into the girls' small home and taking them from their room. Their mother, startled by the noise, attempts to check on them, only to be met with the same armed men who quickly overpower the mother and take her as well. They are all kidnapped and placed into extremely tight cattle cars, so tight to the point where it makes it even hard to breathe. And unfortunately, things were only going to get worse for this family, because these armed men weren't just your ordinary kidnappers. They were a part of a team created by an infamous man, so evil that he was even dubbed the Angel of Death during his time. And little did these girls know, they were about to be subjects in one of the most disturbing human experiments. I was stepping on dead people. These were the haunting words from one of the Kriegel twins as they were being transported into a German concentration camp after being taken. As soon as they arrived, the girls and their mother were immediately brought to a man named Josef Mengele, who, unbeknownst to them, was infamous across the globe for being one of the most depraved doctors to ever exist. He would send off men to find and kidnap twins who were either already imprisoned in the concentration camps or in poor countries around Europe. But that isn't even the worst thing about him. What really set him apart was what he would actually do to these twins once they were alone with him. It's said that he would often inject them with various substances all around their body to see how they would react, inflict physical pain onto them, order some to be killed in order to compare their internal organs to each other, and even attempted to sew two twins together in order to create conjoined twins. The Kriegel twins would be subject to horrific things under Mengele's control, and unfortunately, their story is just one of the 732 twins he tortured throughout the years, each story being more disturbing than the last. Like with Yona Latz, who told an interviewer that Mengele would choose to keep his victims alive and conscious the entire time he would experiment on them. The conditions these children were left in were incredibly disgusting and had devastating side effects, one of them being a severe loss in weight like with these sets of twins. Many twins had died at the hands of Mengele, though luckily there are others who were able to survive and live long enough to share their experiences, including Vera and Olga Kriegel. There was even an entire documentary called Forgiving Dr. Mengele in 2006, created by one of the survivors named Ava Moses, who detailed the horrible things she and her sister went through and how they have chosen to move on with their lives since. Mengele had absolutely no remorse for what he did, describing the kids as racially inferior and suitable subjects for his cruel experiments. But these twins weren't experiments. They were real people who had their childhood stripped away from them and could never get it back. Yet Mengele continued to believe that what he did was justified up until his untimely death in 1979. He was never arrested or charged for what he did to all 732 plus pairs of twins. The year is 1929, and 5 women have just volunteered to be a part of one of the most disgusting and depraved experiments I've ever came across. However, our story truly begins just 10 years earlier. A scientist by the name of Ilya Ivanov, famous for his studies in primates and breeding, wanted to test out an experiment he'd been thinking about for a while now. He was so excited about this idea that he even decided to give a presentation about it to the World Congress of Zoologists in Austria. He wanted to create a new species, a human and chimpanzee hybrid. Ivanov's obsession with this would continue for years, including a failed attempt to inject human sperm into 3 female chimpanzees, all of which died, until finally in 1929 when he would decide to test out this experiment by getting 5 women to volunteer to be a part of an opportunity of a lifetime. Be artificially inseminated with the sperm of a male chimpanzee. And for those of you who are unaware of what it means to inseminate, it's to deliberately put sperm into a female's body without the need for intercourse. The chimpanzee that these women were to be inseminated by and carry his kids was a 26-year-old orangutan by the name of Tarzan. But due to a brain hemorrhage, the ape later died before his sperm could be extracted. This being the last orangutan Ivanov would be able to use, as he was later exiled out of his country due to political reasons and would die in 1932 due to a stroke. The most disturbing part about this experiment, however, isn't even the idea of a human-ape hybrid or the fact that there were women who were actually willing to carry one, but instead what would have actually happened if such hybrid actually were to exist. What would it look like? How would it be treated by society? And would it even be able to survive for long? Unfortunately though, Ivanov never cared about any of that. He was so obsessed with this experiment that he was willing to disregard the lives of those involved, human or animal, no matter the cost. This is a prison cell. However, it isn't your normal cell. It's actually a gas chamber where the horrifying Chimera experiments would take place. And what happened in that cell was responsible for the deaths of hundreds, possibly thousands of people. It all started in 1921 when the first poison laboratory would officially be created in Russia under the code name the Special Office. It was all made in a desperate attempt from the Soviets, who needed a way to develop tasteless, odorless, and undetectable poisons that they could use to kill people without leaving any trace behind. However, the only way they would be able to see if these poisons actually worked was if they tested it on real people. That's when a man by the name of Marinovoski, a key figure in these experiments, would decide that the best subjects for it would be criminals and prisoners of war, and without any of their consent, would send each and every one of them from all parts of Europe to this secret room to test out poisons on those subjects. But these weren't just any poisons. These were deadly, toxic chemicals such as mustard gas, cyanide, etc. Chemicals that could burn, suffocate, and destroy the human body in the worst ways possible. While some prisoners would be injected with the poisons or exposed to them through air, some others were actually given the poisons in the form of a meal or drink that the officials disguised as medication. As a result of all this, these prisoners went through excruciating levels of pain. Some had rapid weakening in their bodies, others developed various skin diseases across the entire body, and most, if not all of these subjects, died within the first 15 minutes of being exposed to the harsh toxins. Those who didn't die and already had poison in their system were personally executed by Marinovoski or other officials themselves. And if things weren't bad enough, not a single one of the men claimed responsibility for the deaths of these subjects. One high-ranking politician who aided in this experiment even had the audacity to say, "I commanded Marinovoski to conduct the experiments on people sentenced to the highest punishment possible, but it was not my idea." Whether those criminals deserve to be used as test subjects and executed or not is completely up for debate. But when you do these things without the consent of the other person and dehumanize these people, it starts to cross the line. However, you guys can tell me your thoughts about it in the comment section below. Now on to the final most disturbing human experiment. A medical worker by the name of Takeo Wano walks into his facility to start working when he spots a gruesome scene in his sight. There on a table is a man, split vertically in half and pickled in a tall jar of formaldehyde. Welcome to the Unit 731 experiments, one of, if not, the most disgusting and disturbing experiments that took place in the 1930s and 40s. And what Takeo Wano saw was just one of the 14,000 people that were killed at the facility throughout the years. Unit 731 was the name of a biological and chemical research facility made by the Imperial Japanese Army in 1936 during the World War II era, and that was all it was supposed to be, However, due to Japan's quest for power and control around this time, they resorted to using this facility to commit devastating war crimes against humanity and engage in lethal experiments to test out the power of their weapons and medical technology on real people. The Japanese army would take prisoners of war, civilians, children, etc., who were deemed inferior, most being Chinese, without their consent, dehumanize these people, and conduct all sorts of experiments on them, which often led to their deaths. And when I say they conducted all sorts of experiments on them, the Japanese army really did any and everything in the book to make these people go through absolute hell, which include, but aren't limited to, setting up explosives filled with diseases that when detonated would contaminate nearby subjects, kidnapping prisoners and smashing their heads open in order to use their brain for research, cutting into subjects without anesthesia to study the effects of medicines on their body, forcing women to be impregnated by other people, including army officials, and injecting them with poisons to see how it would affect the child, and much more. Not a single person from these experiments ever survived, and the ones that did were given the option to either be executed or die by lethal injection. There was no way out of it. Very few were actually able to escape, and out of those people who did, only a select handful have ever spoken out about the atrocities that happened there due to severe PTSD. These experiments were able to go on for more than 10 years, and not a single person that was involved ever tried to stop this torture from happening. But what's truly disgusting about all of this is the fact that most of these experiments, except for a few, had nothing to do with the advancement of weapons or medical technology that the officials had claimed, according to a professor who studied the footage and practices of Unit 731, which leads to the haunting conclusion that all these killings and experimentations may have all just been for the amusement of the Japanese army.